evening, everybody. Welcome to New Hampshire Motor Speedway as it plays host to our third race of the fifth season of the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. Coming off what's been a couple of really interesting season openers, we're starting to see some of the guys that might already be making plans for the championship, but still a long ways to go before we get to the championship crowning at Indianapolis, and this is our next stop. The Magic Mile. Will we see some magic here today? Seth Cole alongside of Matthew Rodriguez. And Matt, if we go back to last season, the first and only time up to this point that New Hampshire's appeared on the schedule for the Dark Horse Racing Series, we almost saw an underdog story come to light with Jim Brooks trying to battle against former champion Robert Maliska III. Would we see something like that again here today?
I mean, we've still got Jim in the field, and I think Jim really wants another shot at redemption, but we heard it from the drivers last season. New Hampshire is such a difficult track to get down, and it's almost one lane, and it gets so tight out of the corners where that instant we saw happen between Brooks and Maletzka, I mean, that was almost unavoidable.
Now we had the season opener at Auto Club. Nick DeGroot picking up the victory there. Of course, that was a double points race as well. Had a decent run last week at Las Vegas, but Craig Forsyth took the checkered flag there. But Forsyth, who struggled with the pit road issue at Auto Club, only gained 5 spots in the standings from 9th up to 4th. He still sits 57 points behind Nick DeGroot. So how much is the 27 car going to push the issue here today to try and gain back the points he lost 2 weeks ago?
I mean, we saw it last season, how quickly things could get out of hand. I mean, we even saw it the season before, how quickly points get out of hand if you don't get a capitalize on it, or at least try to limit your hurt. New Hampshire's one of those tracks where if you're not confident at this track, this is not the track where you really push your luck. This is a track where you find your rhythm, stay safe, just conserve points. But if New Hampshire's your kind of track, hey, this is where we really start pushing the limits. And listen, we can push harder in this corner, we can push harder in this corner, just making sure we're not going to wreck the car. That's the biggest thing.
Very interesting that you bring up the words comfort zone, because if we look at Matt Wagner last week, got wrecked early on in the Las Vegas race after his runner-up finish in the season opener at Auto Club, dropped down, not position-wise in the point standings, but quite a number of points now behind Nick DeGroot, third in the point standings, 56 points out. If you look back at last season's New Hampshire race here, he was 18th out of 19 drivers, and for a guy that obviously last week was very disappointed he was out of that race early, this would seem to me, at least the numbers lining up, that this would be a track that he would not be in a comfort zone in to try and mount a comeback.
See, that may surprise you, and again, some of these guys, we don't point it out enough, but going over the past 2-3 seasons that we've broadcasted at Dark Horse IndyCar Series, they have improved so much. We can pick certain drivers out of this field where, heck, 2 seasons ago, we never would have thought of them being a factor at this kind of track, but heck, today, we can't not roll them in.
There's a couple of guys that I was noticing here in practice that I think we have to keep our eyes on. One of them was actually at the top of the board for most of practice, that being Charles Teed. Now, Teed had a victory at Iowa back in Season 3, a low-banking type racetrack, much like New Hampshire. We'll see if he's going to be able to follow that up with a good qualifying effort. Teed coming into this race 11th in the point standings. So if you're looking at a guy mired down outside the top 10 that could maybe mount a comeback here today, look no further than the driver of the 50 car. And another couple of drivers that have good numbers here at New Hampshire. We mentioned about Gale Brooks, but Jim Brooks, but Gale Brooks also has very good numbers here, a 3rd place performance in his race last season. So, a couple of guys maybe under the radar that could get up there in the vicinity of guys we've seen at the front here in the first 2 races, like Nick DeGroot and Craig Forsyth.
Absolutely. It just kind of opens up the door where New Hampshire's a different kind of track, but with it being a different kind of track, it's a different kind of racing style. And that actually seems to work very well for the Brooks bunch.
Take a look up at the top of your screen as qualifying is underway, and there is the aforementioned Charles Teed out on the racetrack right now in the 3rd position. Jeff Hysong right now at the top of the leaderboard, and we see the low banking here, but about 4 grooves of racing. Things that drivers are really going to have to worry about here today is no banking to lean on off of turn 2 or 4. You run too high, you're going to hit that outside wall and bounce towards the inside wall that separates the pit lane from the racetrack. And so with that being said, how important is it going to be for these guys here in this qualifying session to make sure they're qualified up towards the front?
Well, again, it's so difficult to pass, and I think you even mentioned it where once you get to your spot, you really have to push aggressively as you see Eric Schaus lose the back of the car. And that's really what these guys are fighting, where when you start trying to push harder, you will eventually either start plowing or you will lose the rear of the car, even with how much downforce these things have.
There's Matt Wagner in the Lucas. Oh, machine, and there he goes around off of turn number 2. So, man, I'll tell you what. A lot of drivers trying to push their cars to the limit, maybe over the limit here in this qualifying session and paying the price for it. Now, the good news is that they are able to reset, go back out there and try again, and they've got about 5 minutes to work with, half of that gone, about 2 minutes left. So they do have at least a little bit of a chance for redemption. You know, Matt Wagner had good qualifying effort here at New Hampshire last year. Despite his finish outside of the top 15, he did qualify in the 4th spot, but he's yet to put down a lap here in this qualifying session.
I think really what the big determination is going to be is how hot is the track. Right now, the track's about 101 degrees. That's really going to lead to a lot of slick conditions, a lot of on-power sliding at the rear end, as you've been seeing here. Now, if that track temp gets any higher, that's going to be becoming a lot more uncontrollable, a lot more difficult to drive. And, you know, hey, if you're something like a street stock or a Miata, that track temp doesn't really bother you too much. But in a car with as much power as the DW12, it is so sensitive to that grip.
Nick DeGroot yet to lay down a lap there, the current points leader. We're looking at Luis Gonzalez Nunez, who burst on the scene with a podium finish in the season opener at Auto Club. He is second in the point standings coming to this one. Looks like he wasn't able to get a lap time set down either, but it only takes them about roughly maybe 22 and a half seconds at most to get around the racetrack. So even resetting now with a minute left in the session, still enough time to be able to get a warm-up lap and a money lap in, but it looks like he may actually forfeit it, talking about Nunez, as he's going to just park it on the back straightaway, and looks like he'll be starting deep in the field for this upcoming race.
I'll say early on, I have to say my favorite has to be Charles Teed. Looking at his stats last season of this same racetrack, qualified P3 only behind Covey Moore and Rick Rivon. And unfortunately, the race results doesn't show what he was capable of. I think he may be able to reverse fortunes this season.
Well, Nick DeGroot, you just saw him there have an issue off of turn number 4, so it looks like the former champion and the former winner from this season will not be starting anywhere towards the front. Craig Forsyth got a lap in. He is 6th on the board. Let's see if that improves with 20 seconds left in the session, and he ran actually about 4/100 slower that time. So looks like he'll be, at least for the moment, on the outside of row number 3. But to your point, Charles Teed looks like he's going to be the one to lead us to the green. And when I was looking back at last year's statistics here at this racetrack, maybe the biggest thing that jumped out to me, and granted, pit strategy under the 9 cautions we had would have played a part into this, but we had 9 lead changes among 7 drivers in 150 laps. The most laps led were 42. That's less than a third of the race by Rick Rivon. So there was a lot of actually positioning for the lead that took place there in terms of who was out in front. But again, I think it was those cautions that might have played into the multiple leaders we had in that race.
Same thing, and you mentioned about Nick DeGroot being so far back in the field. Last season, qualified 12th, ended up finishing 5th. Now again, those 9 cautions had a little bit to help with that, but you got to think, there's a trend here. We're seeing that Charles Teed is up near the top of the field. He was near the top of the field last season.
Well,
you saw Nick DeGroot near the bottom.
How about under the radar? I missed this. This must have been under the wire. Luis Gonzalez Nunez sniped the pole position from Charles Teed.
Oh, man, that... you know, I always say I'd rather lose it by a mile than lose it by an inch. And unfortunately, I think Teed lost it by an inch.
Oh, man. Luis Gonzalez Nunez, we saw him go out there for one last attempt, and boy, did he make it count. He's going to be the one that's going to lead us to the green flag. Teed's going to have to settle for outside of the front row on the LMCgear.com starting grid. Jeff Heisong and Matt Wagner, they're going to be in row number 2. And how about a couple of other guys that we really don't talk about week after week? Gary Corley going to start 5th. Yuri Brewpocker there in the 6th position. I mean, keep an eye on some of these guys, because while we didn't see them do necessarily so well at the high-speed tracks of Auto Club in Las Vegas, maybe a track where you have to be more about rhythm than speed is going to fit into their wheelhouse.
So, Seth, you ready for the scary part?
Yes.
Last year's fastest lap was set by Robert Milecka at 22.380. Our pole lap was a 21.999.
Holy cow.
Eric Schaus, our slowest qualifier, ran a 22.343. That was faster than last year's winner.
I hate to say it, but when you think of these type of cars at a track with low banking like New Hampshire, fast is not necessarily a good thing.
I mean, these cars make an excellent lawn dart.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've saw in practice some of these guys taking hits that, a normal stock car, it's buff that thing out, continue on. These things catch air, especially too with the fact they're open wheel race cars. You get up there against that outside safer barrier, those Firestones want to grip the wall and they send you up into the air in a hurry.
Oh, I'm just wondering how much grip we're really going to have. Looking at that track temp looks like it just cooled down about 2 degrees, but still hitting that 3 digits. That's going to be a little bit slick. We're going to see how they really take off here. I'm worried about old tires, though. Old tires, I don't think it's going to take off too well.
Not at all. 150 miles, 150 laps, 15 drivers to take the green. Nick DeGroot, Joseph Morales, 14th and 15th. You didn't see them on the grid because they didn't get a lap time in. Who's going to take the checkered flag here at the Magic Mile? The road begins as Nunez will lead us into turn number 1.
I'm hoping that Nunez got that whole plan figured out. He's starting to pull away a little bit. Charles Teed, he doesn't want to repeat of last season, doesn't want to fade to the back, sends a block on High Song.
And Matt Wagner's going to stick it in. He's going to get into Teed, sends him up into the outside wall. Not even a lap in, and Teed's day could be over. Heavy damage on the right front of his machine, and that goes back to what you were talking about going here into 3. A kind of a block there, not giving much room into that corner, and New Hampshire's not one of those tracks where you can crowd somebody.
So I did miscall it. That was Matt Wagner, but I think it's way too early in the race to be blocking like that. Like, man.
Absolutely.
I mean, pretty much Wagner did not lift because, I guess from Wagner's perspective, he had the position, which I'm not going to deny that. I mean, his nose was there. But same thing for T. T didn't want to surrender position and went down the block. They're just, unfortunately, there's 2 guys who are extremely talented just not giving any room. And it leads to things like that. I'm happy, but no one else was involved in that.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who that car was just behind. I think that might have been AJ Hobson that was up on the high side and just barely was able to get low enough to avoid Teed when he spun up the racetrack. But, we've talked about this the past 2 weeks. It bears repeating every week because of the difference of last season to this season. No faster pairs available to these drivers. So, if this was last season, Charles T could come down pit road, take the faster pair, he'd be good to go again. He's going to spend a lot of time on pit lane trying to get that car repaired. I mean, effectively,
I think
that car is done for the day. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of damage on that right front that he got.
I mean, that really just looks like a pack it up, we're going home. You got to think of the heartbreak for Teed. 2 years in a row, even. And that's it. Charles Teed's parked it. He's out.
Saw right there, that camera angle gave a little bit better of an idea of what led to the contact. I mean, you mentioned it about the speed that these drivers have this season as opposed to last season, just in terms of qualifying laps. You cannot run these cars way down on the inside going into a corner because they are definitely going to shoot back up the racetrack, half a groove, maybe even a full groove, and I think that was partially what happened there to Wagner on the inside line. On the flip side, you run the wide corner to try and arc it in. That's what Charles T did, and unfortunately, it's, we usually talk about this at the mile and a halves, 2 drivers wanting the exact same piece of real estate, and that's what led to the contact. I'm almost wondering how that would have affected the right front wing of Matt Wagner, who's still out there in the 3rd position.
Currently, it looks like Wagner has that whole right front little wing, kind of downforce winglet bent in, so that's definitely going to affect the steering a little bit. But right now, I think we really need to look at the bigger implications where Matt Wagner's P3. Right now, he doesn't really want to drop down pit road and get that wing fixed. At least right now, he maybe wants to hold it off till a little bit later so he doesn't lose track position. It's just so vital here. Really, the run's going to tell if he's going to kind of have an advantage from that or if he's going to disadvantage him. And Teed, I mean, really, with Charles, when it rains, it pours. I mean, he's had 11th, 16th place finishes, and unfortunately, this is going to be a 15th place finish tonight.
Yeah, those finishes for Teed have him tied for 11th in the points coming into this one, 105 points out, and he is going to lose a bunch more here this evening. Out of the race in the 15th position as Nunez gets us back under the green. Yuri Brewpocker moving into 2nd, Matt Wagner in 3rd. He's got his hands full with AJ Hobson, as now Wagner going to jump up to the top side, tries to cross over off of turn number 4, Brewpocker, and he might have the spot, but mention about how difficult it is to pass here as well. With it being as early on as it was, should both drivers have backed out of that situation knowing that it's that difficult to pass in New Hampshire?
Listen, it's easy to sit here in the booth and just say, man, I definitely would have backed out of that situation. I never would have pushed it that hard. And, most people would say, yeah, I would have backed out of that situation. I wouldn't have pushed it. But when you're in that situation, you're trying to, at a track where you're trying to preserve track position, make sure no one's passing you, you're going to fight hard. You're not going to let that guy pass you. And unfortunately, I think it was two guys who was expecting the other guy to give, and they just didn't give, and unfortunately came together. Would the right move have been to let off? Absolutely. But if they let off, who's at fault?
So the couple of drivers are going to fight with each other and the outside wall during the course of this race. Oh, Gary Corley, it was the car I was going to talk about, who had gotten into the wall, and now he's got worse problems off turn 2. He's been spun right in front of the field down the back straightaway.
Ooh, and I think he actually impacted Forsyth and Jim Brooks. As a guy that we were definitely looking at tonight, I think his left front wing, right front wing has been affected.
See if there was contact or if he just got loose, but that car snapped around pretty quickly, so I'm pretty certain he got some help.
Yeah, what it looked like is he actually got a little bit loose on exit, just ended up flat-footing it and just spinning around the back of the car, and unfortunately when he spun around the back, he lost so much grip and pretty much just took him.
Now, New Hampshire's one of those strange racetracks where they've got like the concrete strip over there in the corners, and then it transitions to asphalt on the back straightaway. I mean, you talked about the weather conditions here today.
Actually,
was that played a factor?
I think that may have been some of the patented gap whack. I think that has to be some of the worst gap whack I've ever seen.
We'll take another look, and of course, with Greg Forsyth in the vicinity, your mind goes back to Las Vegas last week when he and Matt Wagner were battling for third place, and very big difference of space between Forsyth and Wagner, leading to Wagner spinning out, and I think you're absolutely right as we saw that look off of turn 2.
That's terrible. There was room, but just how violently that rear of the car came around, there is no way he just lost it off that corner. And unfortunately, Gary Corley has parked it. That's 2 guys out in under 10 laps.
Wow.
That's 2 guys who are really good. I mean, even look at Jim Brooks. Jim Brooks had to go to pit road for an extended period of time. Looks like his right front's broken. He just slid into the wall.
We're going to get a look here from Jim Brooks in the 51 car. And to your point, watch the space between the 27 and Forsyth up ahead trying to make the pass on Gary Corley. It's almost a full car length in between those two. And then there you see the gap lap come into play. And wow.
I don't blame Jim because Jim was thinking it was never going to hit. Unfortunately, you see it with Jim's wheel right there where it was already bent off to the left. There's no correcting that. And when he came off of pit road, he tried his best to make sure it would keep going straight, but you saw him going to turn 4 on lap 9 and turn 3 on lap 9, and he tried turning left and it just didn't turn. It crashed into the wall, and that's it. I think Jim's done.
Well, he came down pit road. They're trying to get some repairs done to his machine. He's already lost a lap to the race leaders in the 13th position. You mentioned Corley out of the race.
Jim needs to keep going because right now Jim has the most to lose at the moment for points. He is 4th in points. He's tied with Forsyth. Forsyth did take some damage out of that, but just not enough. And right now, with Gary Corley and Charles Teed out, there's really no upside. You need Matt Wagner, Luis, or Nick to kind of get affected. And unfortunately, they've been, with the exception of Wagner, they've been perfect at the moment, and they're not losing any ground. So, of course, Jim's going to try and stay in there, try to stay for points, but I'm afraid that the competitive win hope that we had at the earlier today is gone.
Yeah, a lot of eyes were on Jim Brooks here today after last season was leading 27 laps in the closing stages. Contact between himself and Maleska. Jim Brooks on the wrong side of that exchange and finished 15th, 2 laps down in that race. And right now,
looks like
day
Jim's
may be over early as well.
Yeah, Jim parked it in a very interesting way, but you got to think, you come into a track you dominated. You had your best, undoubtedly one of your best runs of the season last season, and got the win pretty much taken away from you right at the last minute. And you come into this season saying, "Hey, yeah, I got this track circled on my calendar. I'm ready to just roll this track. No one's going to stop me. And within the first 10 laps, something happens.
Oh, I know you mentioned about it's very easy for us up in the booth to be able to kind of critique and get inside the driver's mind. But one thing I would have to wonder is with not having the faster pair available this season as opposed to last season, wouldn't drivers kind of change it up just a least little bit here, at least in the first half of this race, in terms of not only how they would race each other, but how they would race the racetrack? Now, granted, the incident we just saw, there's not much that you can do about it with internet connection problems, but with some of the other early contact that we've seen, it's been interesting. We've seen drivers race this hard this early.
I think it's part of the drivers' minds that this wasn't an issue last season, but I mean, we've already noted that these cars are a lot faster than they were last season. I mean, they're breaking the records that these cars set last season. So I think it's a lot faster cars, maybe a different setup, different feel to the car, and they're just not used to it. Even with all the practice they've done, racing side by side and doing solo practice is two different things.
Yeah, to your point, last year's New Hampshire race, the eventual winner, Robert Molesky III, had the fastest lap, 22.380. Our race leader has already bested that, 22.152, almost 0.2 quicker for Luis Gonzalez Nunez. So, yeah, much faster race car for these drivers, and, well, let's be honest, let's call a spade, maybe an entirely different race car from what these guys experienced in last year's New Hampshire race, as AJ Hobson has now jumped up into the second position. Keep your eyes on him because Hobson's been one of those under-the-radar guys in the last couple of weeks. 8th in the point standings, 73 points out, and with the hardships we've seen some of the drivers up there in the point standings have here today early on, could be someone we'll see up in the top 5 maybe by the time we get to Gateway next week.
And it's going to hurt to kind of say out loud, but I mean, Hobson was never one of those guys that you look at saying, man, this guy is a championship contender. I mean, even looking at the life of the Dark Horse IndyCar series, 36 starts, 5 DNFs, 1 win to his name, 8 top 5s and 20 top 10s. I mean, 2 of those top 10s have come this season in the 2 races. I mean, he is really looking like he has improved this season and kind of on the threat. I think he needs a little bit more polish, but I think he can really put it to Matt Wagner and Nunez.
Now, granted, we've had some early cautions here, but would you say DeGroot finished last year 5th and he started 12th? Well, take a look up inside the top 5. Almost 20 laps in, started this race from 14th, and he's knocking on the door of the 4th position.
Man, I'm hoping DeGroot gets the urgency at the moment where Nunez is ready to run away with this. I mean, he has only gotten better with age. I mean, third at Auto Club, 7th at Las Vegas, and right now he is in the catbird seat for his first win. He is driving away from AJ Hobson, and DeGroot knows he has to get a move on.
Right now, we got a car in the wall back there. That was Jim Herrick, I believe, in the 40, and he is slow into turn 3. Eric Schaus had to make an evasive move to the left to avoid him, and Herrick's heading for pit lane.
And just like that, another one bites the dust. That was a hard hit for Herrick. Herrick, one of those guys we had kind of eyes on to improve this season. And realistically, he has not had the start to the season as he liked. He missed Vegas, showed up at Auto Club, 11th place. I know New Hampshire's not really his cup of tea, but man.
Pit road speed, 45 miles per hour, and when they're ticking off 22.5-second lap times, it feels like you're crawling down pit lane. You run into issues here and you make an unscheduled stop, you're losing maybe at the least 2 laps and maybe even more.
I mean, Seth, every time you get that blue flag of that cross, it's, hey, there's a race going on and you are not in it. Oh man, look at Harris' car, it's crabbing. The whole back of that car is facing a different way.
And of course, a big reason for that, the open wheel suspension. Oh yeah, he's got the damage right to that right rear. Might have been the loose sensation we saw drivers dealing with in qualifying. More than likely slid out from underneath him there on the exit of turn number 2, and
he's done for the day.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to figure out how that car was going to feel as he got back out there. He's using the inner loop on the back straightaway going through the road course.
Look at how much he's turning the wheel.
Yep.
He is cranking that wheel to the left, just trying to get it to go straight. And you can see from just the back of the car and the front of the car just having a massive disagreement.
Man, I mean, who
That's
would have
the danger.
Who would have thought 25 laps in that we would more than likely have 4 of our 15 drivers out of this race?
But I mean, going back and looking at that incident, realistically, I was wrong at first. He barely touched that wall very hard. Basically, he was on the outside of, it looks like, Eric Schaus or Jimmy Dry, or yeah, Eric Schaus, and he just put the right sides on the fence, bent the right sides a little bit, and that's all that damage did. And it knocked the toe out of it and made the car almost undrivable.
Good battle here. Three-way battle for the third spot. Matt Wagner, Eric Schaus, Nick DeGroot. Schaus was trying to make the pass for third place on that inside line, had to bail out of the throttle, and Nick DeGroot there to pounce. You talked about the difficulty of passing here. This is very much a momentum track as well. You lose that momentum, somebody's going to be there to take advantage. DeGroot was that guy. So Schaus, who was trying to go up 1 on the current running order, ended up going -2.
Oh, and it looks like Matt Wagner had to slow up a lot for, looks like AJ Hobson. DeGroot makes the move on Wagner. He's up to third place.
And now he'll try and get to the inside of Hobson for the runner-up spot. Schaus to the inside of Wagner for fourth. Now he tucks back in line, and the guy who's got the best seat in the house would be Yuri Brewpocker right now in 6th position, watching this side-by-side battling 2 rows deep.
And the guy who loves this has been Nunez. Nunez has opened up a 5-second lead. I see someone who's practiced this week.
On board with Brewpocker is Wagner on the right, Schaus on the left in the battle for the 4th position. Running the higher line, arcing it into the corner, trying to see if he can get to the inside of Matt Wagner as Schaus completes the pass on that inside line. Very nicely done. It seemed like on the longer run, that inside line was not going to be the preferred area to be able to get the speed, especially on corner exit, but Schaus was able to get it done. I'm wondering if maybe Matt Wagner, all of a sudden, the speed is going in a way, and you have to wonder if it would go back to the potential damage he would have gotten in the incident between himself and Charles Teed.
Well, realistically, it's taking some downforce off that front end. And what it's doing is it's forcing him to turn a lot more aggressively into the corner, put a lot more wheel in the car, and I'm pretty sure he's burning that right front. He's burning that right front a lot more aggressively, and he's going to wear those tires so much more. It kind of comes into one of those situations where I think I would have just went to pit road, would have repaired the car, and went on, but honestly, he made his bed. He's made his plan. This is what he's going to stick with if there's no more cautions.
Eric Schaus picking up another spot, move him up to the 3rd position. At least of the drivers up here in this group, he is the fastest, turning really good lap times. Hobson might have brushed the wall off of turn 2 that last time by. And remember, Eric Schaus is a former winner here in the Dark Horse Racing Series, but that was all the way back at Pocono in Season 3.
You know, I don't even know if I should mention him, but Eric Peterson, Mr. If anything's going to go wrong, it will go wrong. He has been slowly making his way up to the field. Started 12th, ended up racing his way up to 7th. But look at that guy who's in front of him. That's AJ Hobson. AJ Hobson has fallen off a cliff.
Yes, he has. He's lost 2 positions in the last 10 laps or so, and maybe about to lose a 3rd to Peterson. Peterson last season finished 12th here. I think he was next to last car on the lead lap, but this has definitely been a much better start to the season than it was last year for the driver of the 36, as he sits tied for 4th, a 3-way tie for 4th, actually 57 points behind Nick DeGroot.
And just look at these guys. It's so hard to make passes at this track, so you really have to plan out your moves and when you're going to make them. Really, the most popular time is around the entry or middle of the corner, or at least trying to get that good run on exit, but you kind of have to pick and choose your time and hope that you're not going to catch anyone too early, too late, or just miss your window.
There's Craig Forsyth in the 27 car. You saw him on pit road under the last caution. He's just kind of been riding in the latter half of the top 10, currently scored in 9th. Jeff Hysong is the black and red number 18 on the inside there, trying to make the pass on AJ Hobson for 7th place. All this going on here in the middle of the pack, still pulling away, is Luis Gonzalez Nunez, who has opened up almost 6 seconds back to Nick DeGroot. Now, the bad news for Nick DeGroot, especially right now, is the fact that both of them are running similar lap times with DeGroot in clean air. So DeGroot's keeping him at least in striking distance, not losing any more ground, but he's not gaining either. At what point does Nick DeGroot try and change up his line or change up how he approaches the corner, or do you just have to stay constant and maybe hope that pit stops will be the deciding factor?
To be honest, I'd really start focusing on fuel strategy and pit strategy at this point. Right now, we're about 5 seconds out. Our tires are pretty old. I don't think we're really able to make that big of a charge, or at least with how Nunez is running at the moment. I mean, his last lap was a 22.617. DeGroot's was a 22521. There's not going to be a big enough swing for DeGroot unless Nunez really burnt off his tires, which I don't believe he has. So he's really going to have to make a decision. I think DeGroot really needs to focus on pit stops, maybe doing something different.
He's going to have his hands full in a moment with Eric Schaus, because I mentioned that Nunez and DeGroot, they're running similar lap times. Schaus has been consistently about a tenth quicker than the both of them, and he has reeled in the 89 for P2.
Now, I keep watching AJ Hobson fall through the field, and I was looking at the side of Craig Forsyth's car and just said, get out of here, and I know exactly what he's thinking. He put it on the side of his car. He wants him out of his way.
Well, Hobson's on pit road now, so I would assume this would be unscheduled for the driver of the 63. We'll follow up on that as he is on pit lane, going to lose at least one lap, and now he's going to be hoping that this thing continues to go green, because if you get a caution that comes out, it's going to be very unlikely you're going to be able to get 2-3 laps back, at least until maybe the end of this race.
I think most likely that AJ Hobson just burnt off his tires a little bit. Maybe just underestimated how much wear was going on those tires. Again, it's really, these cars are about how smoothly you drive them. It's not about fighting the car. If you're fighting the car, you're going slow. You really have to kind of guide the car through the corner in its best and really easiest way.
Battle for second, hot and heavy. Two different lines being run there through 3
Wagner
and 4.
on pit road.
This would have to, I think, be a scheduled stop for him as well. And I think that, back to the point you made about Hobson, tires, the reason that Wagner would be hitting pit road right now, because he was one that you kind of singled out in the early stages of this run that looked like he had burned his Firestones up quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, those things are Firestones.
yeah, Firestones in terms of the heat that's definitely going through. But more critically, he needs the undercut. It's so difficult to set up a pass here. Yesterday, running in the IR18 league, it was done. Whoever the lead car was had control. Everyone else was fighting for second place. There was nothing you could do if that guy was leading. Right, it's setting the passes up. Wagner's seen an opportunity. Lap times are starting to fall away. There's a window here for him to get something done. Biggest issue yesterday in the Area 51 race was guys losing it, trying to come to pit road. The pit road entry here is diabolically difficult.
And you saw, as soon as Matt Wagner dove onto pit road, race leader Luis Nunez says, all right, I'm not going to give you the advantage of that undercut. He dove onto pit lane to give up the top position. That turns the race lead over now to Nick DeGroot and Eric Schaus, who I'm assuming, at least for the time being, these are guys that are going to try and stretch it as far as they possibly can, maybe catch a lucky yellow flag and trap some of those fast cars one lap down.
Well, I tell you what, again, Schaus yesterday, 1 lap shy of getting the caution he needed. He came to pit road and he was the cause of the caution. He was the last guy that came to pit road. He was the guy that caused the caution. That's just how it is. Sometimes it goes your way, sometimes it doesn't. Look at these guys, though. DeGroot feels like he's got a little bit of control right now. He feels like he's in a really good window. The other thing is, DeGroot, now that he's seen these guys pit early, he wants to go for the overcut. He wants to generate tire benefit. Why? Now it improves his chance to try and get a pass done. He's trying to do everything in his power to do the opposite of what his opponents do.
Well, in every season of the Dark Horse Racing Series that Nick DeGroot has taken part in, he has gone to victory lane at least twice. Has had a multi-win season. He's already got 1 victory in the bag with Auto Club a few weeks ago, and would like on strategy to see if he can maybe pick up win number 2 and only the 3rd start here of Season 5. Eric Schaus got a little tight there off of Turn 4. I mentioned about the fact that Eric Schaus, last time he went to victory lane was at Pocono in Season 3, and when I look at the corners here at New Hampshire and the kind of lack of banking, it reminds me an awful lot of that 3rd and final turn of the 2.5-mile tri-oval. So would something like that play into what Eric Schaus has been able to do here in his attempt to reel in and pass Nick DeGroot for what was 2nd place and now the race lead?
Yeah, look, and I mean, he was racy yesterday as well. Again, different car, different layout, different draft package. It's all a little bit different, but he definitely looks comfortable here. Have a look at the way that he's running the corners. You cannot follow these cars. The arrow, it just won't let you follow the car ahead through the corner. He's offsetting himself. He's making sure that his front wing, his rear wing, are getting the airs to them. Well, I said that, and then he immediately follows DeGroot through 1.
And I have to wonder, too, would aerodynamics, dirty air, come into play with a driver? We know the tire heat's going to make the car tight. We know that the low banking is going to make the car tight up the corner, but does dirty air play a part into that as well?
Yeah, absolutely, and its tire temperature as well is quite critical. One of the biggest things that these guys were playing around with, trying to get the setup right, was trying to. Oh, here comes the Groot. He just jumped on the radio, said he's coming in.
See if Eric Schaus follows him. No, Schaus runs wide, so he's going to stay out and lead this lap. The Groot giving up the top position. I believe the only other drivers we haven't documented that have been on pit road for a pit stop, Jeff Heisong in the 18. And we already mentioned AJ Hobson.
72 Schaus is in as well, so he only wanted one extra lap. I think this is max fuel distance. I'm critical to see if Gael follows him in.
You got Forsyth, Morales, Brewpocker. They all came down the same lap as Nick DeGroot. Schaus down this time, and Gale Brooks going to stay out. This is typical Gale Brooks, though, right? Kind of stretching it as far as possible, and it worked out last season. Gale Brooks bringing it home P3 here at New Hampshire, but it just kind of seems like Auto Club, Las Vegas, we saw the exact same thing take place where when most of the drivers came to pit road, the 71 stayed out 1 or 2 laps more.
That was a tight pit lane entrance. He was right on the bubble. I wasn't 100% sure if he got that one stopped. He might have fooled the sensors because it's an average pit lane speed limit, so you got a little while to get your speed back down and then bring it back up to pit lane speed, which will buy you a little bit of safety. So there is that. It looks like with the pit cycles done, and I think Luis he's just going back to the #1 spot, but this time it's going to be Schaus that inherits the second place.
Yes, it is indeed, by about half a second over Nick DeGroot. So Schaus, who pitted 1 lap later than DeGroot, was able to take advantage of the 89 trying to use the undercut.
Yeah, well, I don't think Nick DeGroot was trying to use the undercut at all. I think he went as long as he possibly could. Wagner has made up a fair chunk of ground, though. That's critical for his race. He's now running in free air. 2 seconds to the car ahead of him, that's critical. Now that means that he can just look after those tires a little bit in this early run. Maybe save a little bit of fuel whilst he's at it, but he's cleared Hobson.
So for some of these drivers, granted, we ran 3 early cautions, but for about maybe 6 or 7 of them, that pit stop was their first of the day. They would have saved some fuel under those pacing laps, so are we looking at 1 more stop to the finish, or do you think it might come down to maybe single-digit laps where we might see a second and final pit stop if this thing goes green?
You're going to see a splash. If this thing goes green, you will have to see a splash. 54 laps under green flag conditions, that's a long way. That says to me that these guys are either A, saving, B, come down to take a splash. So there's a few guys in the field that would have taken that splash and said, hey, I don't have the pace to run up front here. I need to create an offset. And one of the ways they do that was the fuel with those tires. So they've gone ahead and have had a crack at that. It hasn't gone their way as of yet, but things will play back into their hands. Also, have a look at the guys that are pitting early. They're committing to that 2-stop strategy. There's no fuel saving for these guys. There's no way they can make it on without that extra stop at the moment. So that means that guys like Matt Wagner, well, he's got 2 options. He can either save a little bit of tire to try and give himself the opportunity to pass later on in the stint, but he's closing in on Peterson at this point in time. I think he's put the hammer down. I think he's gone in the opposite direction. He's gone, okay, no fuel saving, push hard all the way.
Also, a little note there on Matt Wagner as well. Spent about 5 extra seconds on pit lane to probably get a little bit of work done on that right front wing. It was the first time he had come down pit road since the contact between himself and Charles Teed in the opening lap of this race. So maybe they got that thing back to where he's at 100%. And to your point, now he's starting to turn some money laps in a hunt to get back up inside the top 5.
I mean, he's going to have a crack. He can't sit back there and let things go. I'm going to be honest. Matt Wagner, right now, he would love to be able to go down to his local grocery store and just buy a big old bag of luck. He has had some of the worst luck I've ever seen a guy have over the last few weeks. He's been a huge victim at Gapwack. You got to feel sorry for the guy. He's turning, ultimately, probably some of the best laps, and things are just coming a little bit unstuck. That creates frustration. What's going through his head right now is, I need a good result. What can happen, and Wagner has a very experienced head, so he's got the ability to control this, but what can happen is that frustration leaks out. You try harder, and when you're already at the peak of your condition, when you're trying the utmost, trying harder, that actually goes in the opposite direction. Trying harder means you overwork the car, you overwork the tires, and you're going to make more mistakes when you do that.
Yeah, we mentioned coming into this race as well, the previous New Hampshire event did not go well for Matt Wagner, finishing in the 18th position as AJ Hobson Another unscheduled stop there for him as he's coming back down pit road. He was on pit lane only about maybe 10, 15 laps ago, which triggered the start of the first round of green flag pit stops. Very early pit stop here for him, and I'm assuming he might have maybe gotten into the wall again. Oh,
yeah, I'm going to go check that out.
There's damage on that rear wing there on the right side of it, so I think he may have gotten up and into the wall once more.
Alternatively, I mean, no, he has. He's got the wall off 1 or 2 on lap 60. So, alternatively, I was going to say, there is another option for these guys, and that's to take their strategy in the complete opposite direction. Instead of trying to go for trying to hold off on that splash, how about you get that out of the way early? If the race is looking like it's going to be green flag, you're going to offset yourself. Now, if a caution ever comes out, the strategy goes in the bin, the race is over. You can't do much except for try and get your laps back. Alternatively, if it allows you to put yourself in a place on the track where you've got that clean air to all parts of the nose, you're going to save tire, you're going to be quicker, and strategy may play your way. It may be, give Matt Wagner, let's say somewhere in the realm of 5 to 10 laps here, he may go for it.
It's a good strategy there. We'll see if anybody decides to take it. Of course, to your point, though, the ultimate risk-reward. We've only had 3 cautions here so far today. We had 9 last season, so we may end up seeing in the closing stage of this race a yellow flag shake things up. So we'll see who's going to make the gutsy call to maybe pull off that rather unorthodox strategy, see if they can not only maybe get a top 5 finish, but maybe even get a victory. But I'll tell you, it's going to be very difficult, I think, at least at this point in time, for somebody to wrestle that trophy away from Luis Gonzalez. Nunez out in front, got the pole position, has dominated the race up to this point, and has kept anywhere from 4 to 5 seconds between himself and whoever's been running second place. Formerly it was De Groot, now Eric Schaus in the last 40, 50 laps.
Yeah, it's going to be critical, I think. He's done a great job. He was I was actually in the practice session there yesterday with them, still trying to finalize this up and making tweaks. And he was out there and he was making sure, he was putting in more laps, I think, than the admins were. He wanted to come out and he wanted to put that big stamp in. And when you're putting in the work, it does pay off. And this is such a tricky track. Overtaking's difficult. I'm wondering whether or not he spent a lot of time putting in those qualifying laps. It's all about qualifying on pole and disappearing into the sunset. He's done a great job at that. But have a look at the guys that are behind him. Qualified 13th, qualified 14th. Now they're up there with him. They've got the ability to run with him. The problem is they've already burned up a lot of their stuff to get there. And if, say, someone like Hobson holds Luis up a little bit, they don't have the tires to really respond. So it's critical where these guys qualify. And the guys that are coming from the back, they've really done it the hard way. So if this is going to be a P2, P3 for Eric Schaus and Nick de Groot, ultimately, I'd put my hands together and say, hey, that was probably a race win you threw away in qualifying.
It looked back from Eric Schaus in second place to Nick de Groot, and you could see a big amount of space between those two drivers. Up inside the top 5, that's the closest battle on track. We fall back here to 9th and 10th place. This is Joseph Morales and Yuri Brewpocker, and they're running only about maybe 4 car length separation for that 9th position. The reason this battle is so important, though, this is only about maybe a second and a half ahead of the race leader, Luis Gonzalez Nunez. So you have to wonder, while they're battling for position, how Nunez is going to make his way through this traffic.
Yeah, and critically, let's have a look at the lap times that they're doing. Last lap around, Luis in traffic was doing a 22.657, so just shy of a 22.7. It was Joseph Morales and Yuri Brewpocker both did 22.7s. Let's take another look this time. Nunez comes past 22.5. Let's take a look at everyone else's lap times. Let's look at those guys in particular. 22.6 for Morales, 22.8. So Morales is starting to push that margin away a little bit. Brewpocker, he's just going to start falling back into Luis's clutches, and if that lead car gets past him, his race scenario completely changes.
Riding on board here with Nunez, as you can see those 2 cars we mentioned up just ahead. Maybe about a corner ahead is the machine of Yuri Brewpocker in that 10th position. We do have a driver officially out of the race now. He was sitting on pit lane for the last 20 laps or so, but Jim Herrick has had his car pushed back to the garage area. He's finishing 13th here tonight, joining Jim Brooks, Gary Corley, and Charles Teed in the infield. AJ Hobson, the only car off the lead lap at this point in time, 3 laps down in 11th, but looks like that's going to change very quickly here. 4 car lengths, 3 car lengths from the front wing of Nunez to the back bumper of Brewpocker.
I wasn't here, unfortunately. I had a work meeting for the start of this race, and I'm really disappointed. My heart goes out to Jim Brooks. The guy was on for his first ever win last season when we came to this venue, and a last lap battle, and you can say, yeah, it's Robert Maleska III. Yeah, maybe he was a little bit aggressive, and it might have just been, let Jim Brooks have the win, but you don't do that. He's a race car driver, and he went for that win, and it didn't pay off for Jim Brooks, and that's unfortunate. And for him to return here this year, and things have gone so much in the opposite direction, that's heartbreaking for him. He had a great opportunity, I think, here tonight, and it just hasn't gone his way.
Yeah, in the case of Jim Brooks, as Nunez is hitting pit lane here, so interesting that about 25 laps into this run, he is back on the pit road. But last season, the Jim Brooks incident late in the race, so not much opportunity for him to be able to mount a comeback, but we saw a lot of comebacks in last season's races when drivers would have the early issues, having the luxury of the faster pair to then be able to get back out there, get track position back, and be able to get decent finishes. That's not the case this season. You kind of look back at last week with Matt Wagner, you look at this week with Jim Brooks, I would even throw Charles Teed into the mix there as well. That faster pair not there for drivers to use as a mulligan really has them scratching their head and maybe sweating a little looking at the next tracks up on the schedule. I mean, next week it doesn't get any easier. We go to the 1.25 mile racetrack of Gateway, also known as Worldwide Technology Raceway. I mean, more short track racing for these guys, and there might be a couple of hurt feelings in the early incidents we had here today. Be interesting to see how that culminates into next week.
Yeah, and particularly for Matt Wagner, I mean, he's having a hurt season. He's just hurting in general. The guy has put a lot of time and a lot of effort in, and next week, Gateway, that's his track. Gateway, Motegi, he loves those tracks. He is just down for those tracks. Anytime you want to turn laps at Gateway, Motegi, Matt Wagner will be the first guy you want to talk to. You want to get out there, you want to learn from somebody, Wagner's the guy. And things just didn't go his way in the tail end of last season. They haven't been going his way lately. I mean, it's going to have to turn at some point, Matty. Keep it up, man. Look, I mean, I'm so proud that I get to call him a teammate in the IR18 league, and for all that he's taught me about Indy cars and racing in general. The guy is just an absolute legend of the sport, and everyone goes through a form slump every once in a while, and we're seeing that for Wagner right now.
He's on pit road now to the attention of his crew. We saw also Craig Forsyth on pit lane the lap before. Eric Schaus out in front still over Nick DeGroot, Gale Brooks, Eric Peterson, Jeff Heisong. We're still waiting for those top five to come down pit lane, as well as Yuri Brewpocker, who with the 14 coming to pit lane is now back on the lead lap once again. And that is Matt Wagner, who is back out onto the racetrack in front of Eric Schaus, only one lap down. So when Schaus comes to pit road, the old tires that he's got right now as opposed to the fresh tires of Matt Wagner, Wagner could find himself up inside of the top five.
Yeah, so there's a couple critical factors right now. Matt Wagner has to stay ahead of Eric Schaus. If he falls in behind him, those fresh tires, well, that's it. That's race over right there. You're never getting that spot back. Because the air bubble, the wake to the car, it's just going to be horrendous. Right now, he had cold tires for a couple laps. He was at risk. Now look at him. He's put 2 tenths over Eric Schaus. What Wagner's doing here, and it's a very smart move, he said, hey, this window here, this race is going to get broken down to that extra stop. I'm always going to have to do that extra stop. So instead of it being a splash and go, he's trying to make sure that he has the freshest tires on for the longest period of time. He's short pitting every single time, taking fuel, taking a fresh set of tires, getting back out there on those fresh set of tires. And I think Luis is in that exact same scenario. They're going, hey, instead of trying to push this out, extend this fuel, come in for a splash late and still be on old tires, not really able to defend, let's get freshies on, let's run full pace the whole time, and let's not worry about fuel saving. And look, I'm going to be honest, Luis is quick when he's not fuel saving.
Jeff Heisong going to give up 5th place to come down pit road, and it is race over for AJ Hobson as he's gone back to the garage area. He'll finish 11th place here today. So there's at least 2 drivers that came into this race inside of the top 10 in the point standings that are not going to finish out the completion of this one. Jim Brooks was in that 3-way tie for 4th place. He's out of the race, and now AJ Hobson joining him. He was 8th in the point standings coming to this one after the first 2 races of the season.
Schaus is coming. Schaus has realized that he's getting held up by traffic, and he's going to come into the pits this time by. Why? He's just closed right into the rear bumper of Yuri Brewpocker. That's starting to push him back into Nick DeGroot's clutches. So instead of getting held up by the traffic, instead of being compromised, what he's doing here is he's pitting. He's in the window, This is him committing to 2 stops to home. So this is an alteration to his strategy. Let's see if Wagner is actually going to leapfrog him here. This is critical for Schaus's race. He's out. I think he's clear.
And
is he? Sorry, my apologies. He's still in the lane.
Yep. I was looking, trying to figure out whether the 0 miles per hour was registering for me or registering for you.
I'm actually having a look at lap times at this point in time. Matt Wagner's actually making up a chunk of time. Eric Peterson, 0.7 a second. Yuri Brewpocker, 0.6 of a second. Luis, even 0.1 of a second gain to Luis. So he's making time to leader as well. Schaus is now going to come out, and he's going to be in the middle of these guys, I believe. Yeah, he's actually a long way ahead.
DeGroot's in. Gale Brooks going to inherit the race lead. Ooh, saw him get a little... Well, it's hard to tell if he got loose or got tight. It looked like a combination of both there off of turn 2. We'll see how long it's going to be before he comes to pit road. Wow, that car ran really wide off of turn 4 as well. Gale Brooks has led about 4 or 5 laps here under green flag conditions today, looking for a top 5 run. Last year ran 3rd and didn't lead any laps, so decent outing right now for the 71 car. But one thing, going back to the situation we saw him in out of turn 2, is he's coming in this time. I go back to when we run tracks like Auto Club and Michigan, and the drivers tell us, man, the thing is a handful when we come off the final corner or off of turn number 2 on a low fuel load because the back end is just so light. What do drivers experience on the long run here when that fuel cell starts to empty, or does the tire heat that they get on the long run kind of counter the loose sensation? Because we saw a lot of drivers just looping it off the corner and qualifying with a fuel load.
Yeah, so a couple things about the qualifying fuel load here and the qualifying setup. That's the way that it's designed to drive. It's designed to give the guys really good turn in. Generally, the qualifying setup, when I was testing it with these guys yesterday, it was literally only good for the qualifying laps. You could not run another lap. It was overheating the tires. So the tires were designed to be on the edge. That maximizes the performance on the qualifying scenario. What that means on the race scenario is if the setups are similar, and I'm pretty sure in this case they're actually slightly different, more to be on the tire conservation side so we can actually get some race runs in, which is translated to a lot of green flag running here. So great job with the setup, guys. What they've done is they've been a little bit cautious in terms of overheating that rear and the way that the car develops its grip off that right rear tire. What that means is there's actually more load on the right front. The car actually turns in quite nice, quite stable on high fuel. Great feeling, great sensation in the car, really strong through the middle of the corner. It's all about getting back to the power. How low down the track do you want to run? Because it's quicker to run lower on the track. Very critical here. That puts a lot of load in the right front. On the low fuel, yeah, that car, it's sort of seesaws. It's about where the weight is positioned in terms of where the pivot point within the car is. That's how it works. That's why with cars with the fuel tank in the rear, under acceleration, high fuel, they've got that load in the rear, it's all squatting down in the rear, the rear's got a nice bit of grip. When there's less weight there, the car's squatting on those rear tires a little bit less, there's a little bit less grip there, but the car still wants to pivot around on those tires. That's what they're feeling. This setup, I'd expect something like that, but it looks like our drivers have got it completely and utterly under control.
We're keeping this onboard look with race leader Nunez for 2 reasons. Number 1, he's in a heck of a battle here trying to put Jeff Heisong and Craig Forsyth a lap down. They're running 7th and 8th at this point in time, but also we were originally here watching the digital dash on the steering wheel, and I think we're going to see this quite a bit next week at Gateway as well, where we see the downshifting on purpose going into the corner. Gets up to 6th gear about midway down the front and back straightaway, but then lets it float into the corner, puts it down to 5th gear, and it allows him to be able to get back to the throttle and get a little bit better bite coming off of 2 in turn 4.
Yeah, so effectively what's going on there is downshifting, you're kicking in the engine braking. Stock cars, they tend to not like that. It's because they've got those big fat chunky tires and a lot of torque built up in those diffs. Indy cars are built to be a lot smoother on those shifts, so that's what that's all about. Now when you're downshifting into a corner, it can act very similarly to be a trail brake, but you'll actually be off the brake whenever you're doing something like that. A little bit easier on the tires, keeps the brakes a little bit cooler, wears the car, just helps the car to flow a little bit naturally. If you're doing it too aggressively though, you're going to overheat those tires. And for Nunez right now, with the position that he's on, he's looking for drive off the corners as well. He's really trying to get that car up to speed nice and quickly, because have a look, Schaus is now down to 1.3 here. He's stuck. Nunez is stuck.
If you've got a Jaws soundbite, you might want to play it now because Schaus is closing. What was about almost 2 seconds between those two drivers after that green flag pit stop has been closed down to now about maybe 1.2 seconds.
And you know, this is critical. This is critical for Nunez because this is about his race and maintaining his race lead. Forsyth will now just relinquish the position. So Forsyth's been running that higher line on the corners. He still has a race to run. He's in a battle with Jeff Highsong immediately behind him. Now, the instant he's got dirty air here, all of a sudden, Highsong closes up on him. So him letting Nunez go is actually really bad for his race scenario. The other thing is, he's now a lap down on pace. If he gets a yellow, he's got to do that waiver run process. He may not get to pit. He wants to maintain that lead lap as best as he can. And now, all of this fighting is back into Schaus's hands.
And here's the thing, too, and you see this in a number of races, doesn't matter what the car is or what the scenario is. If you're on the tail end of the lead lap, you're going to battle that race leader as hard as you can to stay in front of him. But once he passes you and that second place car comes up, you move over. You let him on by. So it is kind of an advantage to be running in the second position when you catch up to traffic.
A little bit, yeah. So effective, yeah, you've nailed on the head. The only car that matters when you're going to go a lap down is that leader. That second place car doesn't matter. The only reason it might matter is if another car drops off the lead lap, that means you're losing the lucky dog position. So that's critical. You need to make sure that you're right there and ready to pounce if/when that does happen. For Forsyth and Highsong, they're having an intense battle as well. They couldn't let Nunez go, because if they let Nunez go, the other car was going to file on past as well. That's a race position. That's points. That can't be allowed to happen. So Nunez was just stuck in a really bad situation, and Schaus got a little bit lucky there, but at the same time, that's racing, man. You can't sit there, particularly in oval racing, and say, hey guys, get out of my way. I'm a lead lap car. Because those cars have their own race and their own scenario to work with. And yeah, look, Nunez has a right to be annoyed there, but that's racing, man. You got to deal with that.
Also consider back in the early stages of this race when we started to get into this long green flag run, Nunez and DeGroot, they were running first and second. It was the third place car of Eric Schaus that was running faster than the both of them. And looking right now, he is still a tick quicker than Nunez lap after lap. That last time by about maybe 5/100ths of a second quicker, and he's been consistently that here ever since the two got themselves clear of lap traffic. The other thing we're going to have to keep an eye on here is both of these drivers, their final pit stop is going to take place at different times. This is the 30th lap on this stint for Nunez, only 19 laps so far on this stint for Eric Schaus. So with that being said, do we give the advantage, at least tire-wise, to Eric Schaus because he's going to be making the later pit stop?
Yes, and no. So, well, actually, it's not even tires, because Schaus has the option here to just come down for a splash and not take tires. That's going to save him about 3 to 4 seconds. He's going to be on old rubber. He's going to be running slower lap times. He's going to be more vulnerable to somebody that is on newer tires. But at the same time, right now, Luis Nunez, he's kind of stuck. You're right. He's in that 30-lap old run for this run as it stands right now. He's had to fight lap traffic the whole time. So he kind of wants to come into the pits nice and early. The problem with that is obviously... Oh, he's
Nunez hard into the wall in turn 2. The race leader brings out the third caution of the day.
Oh, man. I'd say his rear tires are just overheated. That's all that is.
He was trying to lap 6th place Eric Peterson, and you just saw the back end come out from underneath, and there's the suspension problem.
He's done.
Oh, man.
He's done.
Wow. This race just took on an entirely different aspect as Nunez is looping it around there in turn 3, trying to keep it pointing in the right direction. Let's go back and see what happened. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Those rear tires, all of those laps that he spent trying to get around Highsong and Forsyth, it all culminated to him not having the grip he needed when he tried to make a pass on Peterson.
Think about everything that we've just talked about. Everything we've just talked about, right? I was in this exact situation yesterday, whereby I was coming up on lap traffic, and that lap traffic, they've got their own race going on, you know, and as the leader, you've got to make your way through them. You've still got to make, and it's a difficult track to overtake on, even when you've got an advantage. There's nothing you can do. As the leader, look, it's tough. I feel for the guy. I really, really do. But That's racing. You have to find your way past it. There's nothing that he can do there. He's got to do the absolute best he can. And you feel under pressure as the leader, and you think this is where it can all go wrong, but he's got to get past them at racing speed. That is how it works for the first lap. There is a gentleman's agreement, I will put in air quotes here, that lap traffic should get out of the way. There ain't no gentleman's agreement at an IndyCar at this level, because that lap means so much to so many people. You cannot afford to lose that lap, and I feel for the guy. He's just lost his potential to win a race here this season, and I wouldn't have done anything different if I was the lap traffic. I gotta tell you, I would not have done anything different. It's his responsibility to get past them. None of them were blocking him, and that's the critical factor. None of them were blocking him at any stage there, so it's on Luis, unfortunately, and that is disappointing. It hurts, but that is racing.
Well, we mentioned that last year, the driver that led the most laps, which was Rick Ravon, led 42 laps of the 150 scheduled. Might just be a tick shy of 100 laps led Luis Gonzalez Nunez, but those laps led are not going to be showing really the performance he had here today in the finishing results. Out of the race in the 10th position for Nunez. And not only does it change kind of the aspect of this race of who might go to victory lane, it changes the points too, because remember, Nunez came into this race second in the point standings. Granted, he was 56 points, or make that 42 points, or 52, I'll get the number right eventually, 52 points behind Nick DeGroot coming into this race, because DeGroot had that double points win at Auto Club, but he would have at least taken a pretty good chunk of that points lead out today if he was able to close out the deal, and if DeGroot had finished in the 3rd position. Now Nunez is out in 10th, DeGroot moves up a spot to 2nd place, and he's going to have maybe a little bit more of a gap over the rest of the competition. Talking about DeGroot when we get to Gateway next week, if this 2nd position stands, maybe he even has something for Eric Schaus. He might be playing his cards a little close to the chest in this one.
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, it's difficult. It is very, very difficult all around. Look, I think DeGroot, in terms of keeping his championship alive and trying to make sure that he's making the most out of it right now, he's got to focus on just securing a 2nd place. 2nd place is enough. Sometimes getting greedy is the worst possible thing that you can do, but he's a smart race car driver. He knows exactly what he's doing. Eric Schaus, exactly the same. But Eric Schaus has got nothing to lose here. He wants a win. He needs a win to get his season online. So you're going to see Schaus get really aggressive here on this restart. He wants to be the leader. It is control the lead, control the field. Schaus has got a great opportunity here.
Eric Schaus so far this season at 10th place at Las Vegas last week, 17th in the season opener at Auto Club.
Look at DeGroot.
This race, 13th
Look at how
in
close
the point
DeGroot is.
standings. And you saw Gail Brooks kind of a little bit out of line there, just in case the top 2 stacked up. And how about Matt Wagner and Craig Forsyth? Both these drivers with some earlier issues in the first 20-some-odd laps of this race. They're in the hunt now.
Yeah, have a look at DeGroot to the inside here, Seth. He got a huge run off the corner. Schaus has to get a monster run from the top here.
And he's going to. Nick DeGroot not able to get back to the throttle. Tucks in line behind Schaus to make sure Gail Brooks doesn't get to his outside. And now we'll see if Eric Schaus, who seemed to have the best car on the long run, if he can start to gap himself back to the former champion.
Have a look at this. 4 cars under an absolute blanket at New Hampshire. I didn't think I'd be able to say this. I thought the aero package would prevent this. This is great race car driving from all involved.
At Wagner, the caboose on the train.
Oh!
Yikes!
I thought he was in there.
My goodness, I don't think that we'd ever think we'd say the bump and run with Indy cars here at New Hampshire, but that was nearly what it was into turn 1.
And that's great driving from DeGroot as well, because you thought for sure he was going in there. There was no way that he's going to save it. That is some of the best defensive protection driving that I've ever seen from any driver, from Nick DeGroot. That is amazing, and that is what it's all about, folks. If he damages his front wing right there, his race is over.
Tell you what that does. That takes Eric Schaus's focus from outside the windshield to his rearview mirror now to see if DeGroot drives it in that deep again.
Well, he understeered through the corner a little bit. I was a little bit worried that DeGroot was actually going to lose the spot to Gail Brooks there, so Brooks was starting to set up a little bit of a run. Now Brooks has fallen off, and here comes DeGroot once more.
And Gale Brooks waiting in the wings as the top two mix it up. Now Brooks drives it low there through 3 and 4. Gets up alongside the left rear quarter panel of Nick DeGroot. Not quite able to get the side draft though into turn 1.
Have a look at each of them, though. They're all having to run different lanes. They cannot afford to receive bad air to any of those aero-dependent structures. They just can't afford it. Look at Gael. He's got to get to the bottom here, because if he runs it and follows these guys around, he's losing that spot. But does he lose the spot to Wagner?
I think he's going to. He lost that momentum there off of turn 4. Wagner filled in the gap where DeGroot was. And now Craig Forsyth enters into the mix there as well in the 27 car. Look at your top 5 separated by about half a second with 30 laps to go.
And look at Wagner. Wagner had to jump on the brakes deep into the corner then to pull the car up. That's going to put load. That's going to put wear. And now Gael's got draft support on the inside.
DeGroot down to the bottom, tries to slide up in front of Schaus.
Wagner
Can't
does a
do
switch.
it. That stacked up Wagner off of turn 2.
And now Gael got back to the top side. He's lost a spot, but I think he's in his preferred line here.
Craig Forsyth took the victory last week at Las Vegas. He's looking for back-to-back trips to victory lane here this week at New Hampshire. Now Wagner to the inside of Schaus for the top position.
Matt Wagner, more like Matt Wagnerd.
And at what point are these drivers going to kind of have to look at Eric Schaus and say, the only way we're going to get around these guys, he's not yielding us the top side, we're going to have to kind of pull a slide job here in the entry of the corner and try and block his momentum of battling back through the center of the corner off.
And yet again, I want to point out to the cleanliness of the drivers here. Nick DeGroot had an opportunity to perform a slide job there, but he wouldn't have cleared and it would have stacked up everyone and it would have caused a wreck at the back of the pack. DeGroot elected not to do that. And that right there says multitudes about the driver quality in the league and the careful driving standards of the league.
Things getting a little bit spread out now as race leader Eric Schaus has about 2 car lengths back to Matt Wagner, another 2.5 back to Nick DeGroot. Gale Brooks and Craig Forsyth, though, still in a tussle for the 4th position. And not too far behind them is Eric Peterson in the 36, who I believe got the lucky dog under the last yellow flag, and he's got a shot to maybe be up here inside the top 5 in the closing stages.
I think Craig Forsyth's actually backed things off here a little bit. I think he's trying to do a little bit of tyre conservation at this stage of the race. There's still 25 laps left to run at this point in time, so I think he's going, all right, watch these guys, let them burn off some tyre. 15 laps from now, I'll start pushing.
Now, so far, you mentioned about how clean these guys are racing. One driver that was not hoping for something like that was Yuri Brewpocker. He took the wave around under this last yellow flag. 35-lap-old tires. There's no way I don't think he's going to be able to make it to the conclusion of this race before having to come to pit road for at least a splash to make it to the conclusion. So he's hoping to see a yellow flag sooner rather than later.
Yeah, 58 laps, that is out of the question. He would have to be on the clutch and running so little fuel around each and every lap. He hasn't got a choice, though. He's got to hang in there for as long as he can. He's got to clutch. He's got to make this fuel last as long as possible. Because if he pits early and another caution comes out, well, I mean, he never gave himself the option. He's going to stay out there. Wagner's cleared him. Wagner's got the lead.
Wagner is out in front, and Schaus might have brushed the wall off of turn 4 that last time by. Maybe a little frustrated right now, the fact that the gap is slowly opening up between himself and the 6 car.
And you keep your eyes on Schaus at this point in time as well. This one isn't over. Schaus will rebuild the run. But from up until now, it's been Schaus driving defensively. Now he's got to go on the offensive, and we'll see how that works its way out. He's got the freshest tires, remember? He's had clear air to that nose for the longest period.
And Matt Wagner, last time by, ran a 22.148. That's only 2 100ths over the fastest lap he set today. And he right now is on it, trying to keep Eric Schaus at bay, about half a second between those two. But remember, Eric Schaus, when we saw him and Nunez, he seemed to be the faster car in the long run. Matt Wagner had the early issues, so he was kind of laying in the weeds. We never took much focus of how fast his car is on the long run.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to keep your eyes in the back of the pack. And remember what I said about Craig Forsyth as well. He's going to need to start building his run now, probably in about 5-8 laps, somewhere in that realm of things, because he wants to give himself probably 2 laps for each overtake that he's got to try and make. He's got to build the run, get there, clear the car, build the run again, clear the car, get there, build the run. So he needs to go, let's say 3, give himself enough time. If he's saving tires, now he's got to start burning.
You know, we talked about the hardship for Matt Wagner last week at Las Vegas, but I think it puts even more importance on the runner-up finish he had in the season opener with the double points, because with that, he came into this race, yes, 56 points out of the points lead, but still third in the standings. If he's able to close it out with a victory here today, he'll be able to eat somewhat into Nick DeGroot's race lead and might be able to build a little bit of a road to recovery after the DNF he had last week.
And it's critical for him as well in his point standings that DeGroot's not second. If DeGroot was second, yeah, it's a small margin. You're eating a little bit into that. But for each place DeGroot is falling down that order, that's more and more. So it's quite critical here that he defends this lead. And you'll see him get defensive here. I mean, it's a race win, but it's a race win that keeps his season alive. That's why it's so much important. He will put big significance on this, particularly given the last few weeks that he's had.
That's a great point. They run somewhat similar. I think it's actually the same point standing system this year that they ran last year. And with that being said, Matt Wagner, bonus points notwithstanding, would get 50 points for the victory. Nick DeGroot would get 35 for finishing third. So that's 15 points right there, not counting any bonus points for laps led or anything that Wagner would get an advantage over Nick DeGroot with.
And remember that Nunez has probably stolen the point for most laps led because he did lead such a huge chunk. And this is only now that Wagner's gotten to the point here. Schaus hasn't led enough. Schaus did lead for a good chunk here, so Nunez has probably got that most laps led bonus point all locked up. And now Nunez, DeGroot is actually on the assault here on Schaus.
Trying to get that runner-up position on the inside. There is Yuri Brewpocker coming back onto the racetrack. We showed him moments ago. Had to pit after taking the wave around. Could not make it the rest of the way, and he's going to come out right in the vicinity of the race leaders.
Yeah, but have a look at the way that he's driving the car. He knows that there's absolutely nothing he can do from this position, and he knows that he's in the way of these leaders, so he's getting down. Look, I mean, he probably could have lifted a little bit earlier to let Gael pass a little bit sooner, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's a different situation, and Luis will be annoyed if he watches that and he sees that, because he sees lap traffic getting out of the way of the leaders. It's a completely different scenario. In Yari's position, he's got no way back into this race, whereas those other cars earlier for Luis, they were fighting a lot heavier. There was a lot of the race to go, and they needed to stay up there.
This is the incredible thing about races like this and tracks like this, is usually it can end up surprising you. You looked back at the numbers at Auto Club. Matt Wagner was up there in the top 3 guys that you expected to go to victory lane. He finished in
second. DeGroot got a huge run!
Ooh, wow, Schaus might have gotten the wall too. Lost momentum. But Wagner finished second. He didn't get the victory. He was close, though. Last week at Las Vegas, he was up there in the top 3 of the drivers you would look to see go into victory lane. Finished in the garage area. If you looked at the numbers coming into this race, this looked like it'd be Achilles' heel for Matt Wagner, finishing 18th out of 19 drivers last season. And right now, he is 10 laps, 10 miles away from maybe capturing his first win of the 5th season.
And critically, have a look at the battle that's developed around P2. Gael Brooks just sent it down the inside of Nick DeGroot, and he's going to try and build a run here. He had to lift. That was a little aggressive from DeGroot, but he's got to get aggressive. He has to maintain this position. He wants P2. He has to maintain it. That's why he's aggressive there.
Couple of yellow and black machines mixing it up for the final spot on the podium. Nick DeGroot looking for what would be his 3rd straight podium finish on the season. Gael Brooks looking for his 2nd podium finish at New Hampshire in the last 2 years. And they've got Yuri Brewpocker on fresh tires behind them as well. Just kind of, I don't know if he's able to stay out of this, because his closing rate on these guys and the tires he's got are so much fresher.
Well, it'd be interesting to see. I think Yuri might want to try and set a fastest lap of the race. The best thing he can do if he does that is back it all the way off. He's actually got a reasonable margin back to the next car on the queue. 4.6 seconds now back to Craig Forsyth. So Craig wasn't saving tires. He was burning. He was trying something different. It didn't work in his favor. He's now fallen away. So it's a 4-car battle. Yuri, get out of there, man. You just don't need to be in there. Go steal that fastest lap. Whilst ever you're underneath these guys, there's no chance you got him stealing that one. But I think Wagner at this stage has done nearly enough. You've got to make at least a 10th back on Matt Wagner here to get him. And you've got to complete the pass for Eric Schaus. DeGroot now, his tire's burnt off. He's fighting with Gael. All of that momentum loss with the battle that he had with Gael, I don't think he's got what he needs to get back to Schaus now.
You know, you mentioned about that fastest lap, but those that don't know, that actually is a bonus point that drivers can get as well. You might think that it would go to Nunez or Schaus or even Wagner have taken turns out in front. No, it's actually 4th place Gael Brooks who has set the fastest lap of this race at a 22.063. So right now in possession of that bonus point with 5 laps to go.
I tell you what, that just speaks to the improvement of Gael Brooks as well. Last season, you wouldn't have really had him down, maybe an outside shot at a podium. No, this season he's come out, he's punched above his weight, and he's put his car everywhere he needs to be. At no stage here has he been over-aggressive. Normally when you get a lower chance driver who's up in here for the first time, it goes one of two ways. Super aggressive, super passive. Super aggressive, this is the first chance I've got to be up here, drives it in deep, overdrives the car, puts it in the fence. Hasn't seen that from Gael Brooks. Alternatively, super passive. I'm up here fighting with guys that I shouldn't be up here fighting with. I'm just going to let them have their race. I'm going to be here and pick up the bag of points. No, he's raced them as if he's raced anybody else, and it's been a phenomenal display of skill from him.
15 drivers took the green flag today. 9 still out on the racetrack, 6 of them on the lead lap, and there you see the gap, which translates to about 0.8 of a second from Matt Wagner back to Eric Schaus. The lap's ticking away quickly. The time for Schaus to be able to get up there ticking away quickly. 2 laps to go for Matt Wagner. You know, they called this the Magic Mile, and we've seen a little bit of magic here today. Lap 1 of this race, Matt Wagner makes contact with Charles Teed. Had to fight that right front wing damage for the first half of this race. Would we have expected to say that with 1 lap to go, Matt Wagner is about 1 mile away from capturing the checkered flag?
Look, there's a few drivers in the field that are capable of that kind of a superhuman effort. Matt Wagner is one of those. He's consistent. He's quick. He knows what he's doing. He's the kind of guy that you say, look, we're going to throw you in the deep end this week. You're starting at the rear of the field. Go win it.
And he will. Since Texas of last season, he's back to victory lane today. It is in the Dark Horse 150 at New Hampshire. Matt Wagner joins Craig Forsyth and Nick DeGroot as a winner in the 5th season of the Dark Horse Racing Series.
Oh, finally. And boy, doesn't that break the curse of bad luck that he's been having. And he would have felt that way at the start of this race. He would have put his head in his hands and been like, no, not again, not again. Last week, I think he completed 5 laps. 5 laps. And he was frustrated yesterday. Things just didn't go his way in the IRIT. Put him in the DW12. He put some laps in. He helped tweak the setup. He helped get things right. And man, does he get to celebrate.
This might be maybe the longest burnout we'll see Matt Wagner do in a long time. Just the elation. You talked about the hardships that he's had, not only in this series, it's actually translated over to some other series as well. And finally, that curse broken. And even more importantly now, a little bit of good mojo in the camp of the driver of the 6. It could translate now into the upcoming weeks as he tries to make it 5 for 5 in different drivers winning the championship here in the Dark Horse Racing Series.
Man, I'm so proud of him. He's really good job from these guys. And ultimately, Nick DeGroot, he's probably going to walk away from here with a championship lead. He's got such a big margin. But that is Matt Wagner saying, I am in this fight. I am in this hunt, and I want to be champion. He's got an opportunity here. But things haven't gone his way. You've got to turn things around. You've got to keep your mindset positive, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about that except for go out there, keep driving through the bad luck. Look, when you're racing an IndyCar, when you're racing at 200 miles an hour, it's about give and take. It's about you've got milliseconds to react sometimes just because of the way things that are all going. And look, I mean, he's come on the back end of it. Gapwack has not been his friend of late. It has been his crippling factor. And the man, that performance tonight, when he's been down in the dumps, when he has been frustrated, I rate that as one of the best drives you are ever likely to see. Why? Because at no stage tonight did that man give up. And giving up is the easiest thing for anyone to do, given what he has been through in iRacing in the last few weeks. It is the absolute easiest thing to do, and that man never did it.
Well, last season, Matt Wagner was a multi-time winner. He had to wait 6 weeks to get his first win that year. Only had to wait 3 weeks to find victory lane here in Season 5. And how about some of these other performances? You mentioned about Eric Schaus really quick yesterday. Follows it up with a runner-up finish here tonight. Nick DeGroot going to preserve his points lead with a third-place performance. Gael Brooks back-to-back top 5s here in his career at New Hampshire in 4th. And Craig Forsyth, another driver, much like Matt Wagner, who had some early damage, had to battle back and brings it home still with a top 5, 1 week removed from his trip to victory lane at Las Vegas.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's what I've learned from the last few rounds. Sorry, I've just had a few bites to eat. It's midday, just after midday over here, so it is lunchtime. Ultimately, what we've seen over the last few weeks is different track types suit different drivers, and we see different drivers coming to the fore. What it's going to be about is consistency of those finishes. And if you have a look at who's been up there in every single race so far this season, is Nick de Groot. That's why he's leading the championship. He's only won one race of 3. That's all you need to do sometimes, is you take those P2s, you take those P3s. Why? You're only losing points to 2 guys when you take a P3. When you finish P2, you're only losing points to 1 guy. Sometimes a top 5, yeah, you got to let points go sometimes. You've just got to make sure you cross that finish line. And at all stages tonight, did Nick de Groot make sure that he didn't push himself in over his head? And that's why he's walking away series leader. And there's a lot of guys tonight that'll be taking, a lot of pride out of that. Luis, oh man, you got to feel for the guy. You absolutely have to feel for the guy. He was on for a race win, and he just got frustrated behind traffic, and he let the frustration get to him. And the guy that wins tonight versus the guy that didn't even finish the race, you've got to have a look at that dynamic as well. That is so critical. There are 2 types of drivers. There's your Matt Wagner kind. Frustration, circumstance, doesn't phase him, doesn't get to him. Luis, I think he just got a little bit hot under the collar. He's frustrated. He had a reason to be frustrated, but there's nothing you can do about that in the race. He got in over his head. He made it. Well, in over his head is even the wrong term. He just made a mistake. And he got punished in the worst possible way. And you got to feel for that guy.
Now, much like we saw last week, the hardship of Matt Wagner translate 1 week later to a trip to victory lane. Be interesting to see if Nunez, with the hardship here tonight, might be able to mount a comeback next week at Gateway. But it's time to go down to pit road and talk with some of our podium finishers here this evening. And let's see if we can kick things off with the guy that's going to keep the points lead and gets his 3rd straight podium finish of the season. Let's see if we can talk with Nick de Groot. Hey, Nick, Scott and Seth up here in the FRN booth. You got us?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Oh, man, I mean, a solid outing for you yet again here today. You keep that points lead intact, but we saw you really fighting there for that second position in the closing stages of this race. It looked like it was not only difficult to pass on the early run, but even more so difficult to pass on the long run. I mean, what were some of the things that you as a driver had to do to be able to set up passes and make them work?
Yeah, it was all about timing. And I think I was trying to get him in turn 3 a couple times when I was battling Shelfs for the lead, and that was the wrong move. I should have been going for it in turn 1, setting it up out of 3 and 4. But yeah, because I think that's what Wagner did, actually. I think he got him 1 and 2. But yeah, it was so hard to get to his inside, and he was protecting that outside so well. Now, on the restart, I rolled through turn 1 so much better than he did. And I think I could have cleared him in 3 if I was a little more aggressive, but I didn't want to just chop him and cause him to either lift or run into me. And funny enough, I ended up doing that later to to Brooks, which I did not mean to do. I thought I had more room exiting that corner, so glad he lifted for me. But yeah, it's so hard to pass here. Really, the only way to do it is get to their outside somehow or throw the slide job and hope it sticks.
Nick, I want to talk to you about traffic and the impact that traffic has in terms of deciding race results. You can't get rid of it. Traffic is always going to be part and parcel of racing, whether that is oval racing, whether that is dirt racing, whether that is road racing, anything. Traffic is part and parcel of life. You got to feel for Luis tonight. 100% you got to feel for him. But if you're in that situation where you're the car that's about to go that lap down, you've also got to race to stay on the lead lap. And it's something we talked about quite a lot, and it's a difficult situation to solve because there is no definite solution. It's all dictated by circumstance, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so tough because if I'm in that position with the leader on me like that, I'm probably just going to give it up because I know pit stops are coming. I can go further, and I don't want to get run over or cause an issue with the leaders. But Peterson in that situation had every right to defend that. He's trying to stay on the lead lap. He's running like 6th. So if I was Luis in that position and somebody's not giving it up willingly, I would look at the pit window and be like, can I short pit? Can I pit early? But he was just getting frustrated underneath him, trying to get by him, and me and Schaus are coming, and I'm like, this is probably not going to end well. I've been in that position where you're trying to get through a lap car, you just can't get by him, and the frustration Bull's over, and we saw the result, which really sucks because he was so fast here today. Awesome lap for Pole. Led almost every lap up until the crash, and yeah, I think it would have been interesting coming down to the finish if he hadn't had an incident, because he would have had older tires than me and Schaus, and we'd have been coming similar to that situation. But lap traffic, you got to deal with it at places like this. It's tough. It's tough.
Shifting gears, looking ahead to next week, we head to Worldwide Technology Raceways, a track that you've been in victory lane at back in Season 2. I mean, we've seen here in the first 3 weeks, you've had a car that's capable of winning, but if you're not able to quite have yourself positioned to take that checkered flag, you still keep it up there inside the podium. And Scott brought up the fact about, consistency in this type of a series wins championships. So what's the confidence level heading into next week?
Really good. I mean, we got a first, a second, and a third. So if we finish fourth next week at Gateway, I wouldn't be disappointed. It'd be another solid result. Keep the streak going. But yeah, this is exactly what we need. Good races every single time. And in this one specifically, since I botched qualifying, I was paying attention to the bonus points for passing the most cars during the race. And I went from, 14th to 3rd. But then I look at Schaus. He went from 13th to 2nd, so I think he got those. I think he stole those points from me. But, hopefully we qualify better next week, because Gateway, New Hampshire, difficult tracks to pass. And we were able to use strategy tonight to kind of make up for that. But I don't want to have to do that at Gateway, because it's so hard to pass. And it's going to be another place you're going to have to deal with lap cars like this, and anything can happen. So we'll try to keep our nose clean and keep piling points.
Yeah, we've seen in the last 2 weeks a caution has kind of been the deciding factor right in the middle of pit stops, right in the middle of strategy. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we get to Gateway next week. Nick, congratulations on yet another great performance here this season. And you know the drill. We're handing the mic over to you now for some thank you sponsors and shoutouts.
Yeah, thank you to everybody at Factory Back Motorsports, CovyMore.com, Motorsport.com, DeGroot Automotive, U-Haul and Detailing, Cowboy Shit, and let's get them next week.
Nick DeGroot, P3 here tonight at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway, as now we're going to see if we can get our runner-up finisher here tonight, and that would be Eric Schaus, his first top 5 finish on the season so far.
And
hey, Eric, Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
hey, Seth, how are you?
Doing good, man. I'll tell you what. Looked like that 72 was going to be in victory lane, but then that caution comes out. Everybody gets bunched back up. I mean, what was going through your mind there? Because it looked like you had this race in hand after we saw the 14 have to retire.
Yeah, I didn't even mind the caution. The caution worked out well for me. We got to get fuel right when we needed it, so I didn't have to do a green flag stop and risk messing that up. So I was pretty happy. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, Matt just made a really good move, spooked me a little bit, so it threw me offline, and he was able to get around me, and from there it was just dirty air. There was nothing I could do.
Yeah, look, I mean, we just spoke to Nick about traffic and overtaking, and we're going to two courses in the space of 2 weeks whereby overtaking is different. It generates a different pit strategy. It generates a little bit of a different mindset from the drivers, and it also generates, when you get a caution at a particular phase of the race like this, it generates some exciting racing at a course where you wouldn't otherwise see it. It's just you go to somewhere where we just come from, like Las Vegas last week, and then you come here, and it's completely different mindsets, completely different guys up there and in the points, and you've got to keep yourself alive at all stages because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. These short tracks, they've got their own strategy to them. Typically, I don't run well here, so I'm happy with a second, even though the win was in grasp. Either way, you got to take what you get.
Something that we observed in the beginning stages of this race, before the green flag was even taken, was the difference in speed from the DW12 car last year here at New Hampshire to this year, and it was kind of night and day. There was about 2 100s, 3 100s to be gained on speed here this season, just based off of the pole lap, the fastest laps that were turned in the early stages. With that extra speed, does that have to change your approach on how you make your way around this mile racetrack?
Well, it certainly changes the lines, the liftoff points, that kind of stuff. But overall, once you get into the groove, it's like riding a horse or riding a bike. It's pretty it's easy once you get into it.
Well, a great performance for you here tonight, Eric. Had to fight your way through traffic early with a 13th starting position, but bring it home runner-up here tonight, up inside the top three pretty much the entirety of this race once you got up there and never fell out. Congratulations on a great performance, and now we'll give you the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks to Dark Horse and Area 51 for putting on these leagues. Thanks to you guys at the in the booth. Really appreciate the broadcast. Looking forward to going and watching that. And then thanks for anybody out there watching. We appreciate your support and look forward to having you at some more races.
That's Eric Schaus. He's your runner-up finisher here tonight at the Magic Mile. Once again, congratulations and best of luck next week at Gateway.
Thanks, guys.
Let's see if we can go down to Victory Lane and see if we can talk with Matt Wagner, who gets it done here tonight after a late race restart for his first win of Season 5. Hey, Matt, Scott, and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you.
Well, man, I'll tell you what. We saw the early contact in this race, kind of wondered how it was going to affect you for the long run, but that caution comes out, you're bunched back up with the top 5, and next thing we know, we turn and look, you're out in front and pulling away from Eric Schaus, picking up the checkered flag here tonight. After the hardship of last week at Las Vegas, just how good does this one feel to kind of get things turned back around?
I tell you what, it feels pretty good. What happened after last week? Can we just forget about that? But I really, my heart goes out to Charles Teed. I checked up a little bit. He came down right on me, and it was more like a little bit of a racing incident there. But I hate making contact with people. I just don't feel good about it. It makes me sick in my stomach. So I'm sorry, Teed. I know you're out there watching, but I sincerely apologize. But during that next set of pit stops, I actually did have a front wing replacement. I had to wait in the pits extra 5 seconds. So with that caution coming out, it did wonders for me to catch back up to the field.
Look, I mean, Matt, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind ride over the last few weeks, and I've had the pleasure, the commiserations, the disappointment of being lucky enough to be along for that ride a little bit with you, and ultimately you come out, and tonight the words that I used to describe this drive tonight was, that is the drive of a champion. That is one of the best drives I've ever seen. To start with the circumstances that you started with, then keep your head in the game and keep yourself adaptable, agile, and constantly never think that you're completely and utterly out of the race. That's the thing about you, isn't it? You're just always in the race. Talk to us about the emotions from lap number 1 to lap 151.
Well, lap number 1 was my first order of business. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
We got you.
Okay, I had a little problem with my VR headset. I apologize. But from lap 1, my whole instinct was to keep the car clean, no incidents. And unfortunately, that happened, and that was ultimately terrible. But me and Gael were discussing in Discord. I kind of felt bad me passing toward him, going to that last run there. But I had to take the run because I know I can probably get around Nick. If he mistimes his run on Eric, I know I can probably take advantage of it, and that's what happens, how I took second place. And the battle between me and Eric, he thought I sent it on him. How me and him were talking after race as well. And he made an error, which ultimately kind of played in my favor there.
But that's what it's about from lap 1 to checkered flag. I mean, it's about making as minimal mistakes whilst driving at such a high pace. It's risk and reward, and I think what you mentioned there, particularly with contact with Charles Teed very, very early on, is that risk didn't happen. The risk went the wrong way to start off with. The reward come later on. You are making some high risk attempts, but that's what you got to do to win motor races. You don't win motor races by sitting back and watching.
Yeah, that you're exactly right. But that move right there between me and him, that was not actually really
It's a
aggressive
mistake.
move.
It's racing.
No, I was just trying to show nose. That's all I was doing, and I was going to fall back right behind him, and hopefully, I'll get a nicer run the next time we go around 3 and 4, because that's where the passing happens, 3 and 4. But I'm really surprised I made that pass on 1 and 2. But as you said, as far as confidence level goes, you don't know how much this brings up to me. It's the last week was just horrible. It was like my worst week in leagues altogether. But this is great medicine for us and the whole Yard 51 team. I'm glad to bring home the victory for us.
Not only gets you in victory lane, not only kind of stops the bleeding there of the hardship you've had in the last week, but also gets you some pretty good points as well heading into Gateway next week, allowing you to cut into Nick DeGroot's points lead and maybe continue to do that when we get to Worldwide Technology Raceway next week. Matt, congratulations on the victory here tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well-deserved, exciting finish there, and now we're going to hand the mic over to you for some victory lane. Thank you, sponsors, and shout-outs.
I'd like to thank the guys who put together this league. Eric, Charles, especially Eric. He's the flagship of this. He makes the wheels turn in this league, and he puts the time and effort and all everything. It's just great the way he does things. You guys, as well as broadcasting, Seth and Scott, you guys are like really good in the booth. I enjoy watching your guys' broadcasts. I do peek in on the some of the NASCAR ones. This is pretty good, So, but FRN, you guys are awesome. Troy Lee Designs, Team Area 51, Bud Kicker, everybody, HyperX, everybody puts this program together. I really do appreciate it.
Matt Wagner, your winner here tonight in the Dark Horse 150 at New Hampshire, working some magic at the Magic Mile. Congratulations once again there, Matt, and best of luck next week when we get to Worldwide Technology Raceway.
Thank you, Seth. Have yourself a great night.
So as Matt continues to celebrate here this evening, we're now 3 for 3, and drivers going to victory lane here this season in Season 5. And I mentioned this, and I just want to embellish it a little bit more here, Scott. The last 2 weeks, it has looked like somebody has the race in here. Actually, we can even go back to the last, the season opener at Auto Club. It looked like back then it was going to be either Craig Forsyth or Matt Wagner that was going to win that race. And then from out of nowhere comes Nick DeGroot. Last week, it looked like it was easily going to be Craig Forsyth or Nick DeGroot, and then all of a sudden it was Craig Forsyth that jumped out to the forefront with the timing of a yellow flag. Here tonight, we looked at Nunez. Then all of a sudden it changed to Schaus. And then next thing you know, a yellow flag comes out and it's Matt Wagner out in front. It just kind of seems like in these races, you can't give the trophy to anybody until that checkered flag waves.
And how good has the racing actually been? It's quite easy to sit down and say, when you look at other formulas, when you look at other styles of racing, the cars can't race close together. The aero packages, it's all this, it's all that, it's all the other. But you've got... I look at the whole field here, and I could say the whole field can win a race on any given day. It just comes down to circumstances. Yeah, there's guys that are more probable races, but at no stage can you sit down and say, Gael Brooks can't win a race. Jim Herrick, Hysong, all of these guys, the whole field is in the running at different phases. Brewpocker, his winner's coming. I've got my eye on him. Luis, his winner's coming. It was coming tonight. It didn't go his way. That's racing, man. Look, I get up, and it's Thursday here in Australia. I get up on a Thursday morning, and I am just excited to watch Dark Horse. I get to sit here in the booth with you and commentate the race as well, but I'm also enjoying the race. Ah, man, this league. I love this league to bits, man.
With all that being said, let's look ahead next week to Gateway, because I'm not bringing out the crystal ball. That's for predictions. Let's go to just cold, hard stats. In the last 3 seasons, that's right. In the last 3 seasons, here at Worldwide Technology Raceway, Season 2, Nick DeGroot. Season 3, Robert Maleska III. Season 4, Henry Bennett. For DeGroot and Maleska, it was their championship seasons that they went to victory lane there. Henry Bennett was in the thick of the championship picture last season. Is Gateway this season a place that drivers that are hoping to hoist that championship trophy at season end are looking at to get a statement win?
Well, you said this actually, Seth, last season before we went to Gateway as well. Gateway's critical. Gateway is a turning point in the season. From here, you either start your trend upwards. I have a look at Matt Wagner's run tonight, and I say, here's a guy who's had a couple bad weeks. This is his trend. This is his run towards the flag. You have a look at a guy like Nick DeGroot. He started strong. He's still strong. He's having average finishes. Is that enough to get him across the line? And then you have a look at a guy like Luis. Started strong. Really good opportunity tonight, trending downward. Anything can happen next week, Seth. Anything can happen. One of the biggest things is once you get about 4 rounds into a season, some drivers, they get frustrated, they start to walk away. That is critical. If you're going to be a championship winner, you cannot afford to not bring your A game every single week of this season. There are so many leagues where you sit down and you say, hey, there's one guy who is completely and utterly outperformed the field, run away with things. You cannot say that about this league. You cannot say that about Dark Horse. Remember what I said earlier in the piece as well. A P3, oftentimes in this league, is enough. Will that be enough next week? Well, it might have to be the win.
It's going to be very interesting. I mean, so far we're going to be going 4 weeks, 4 different track lengths, 2 miles in the season opener, 1.5 miles last week, mile here tonight, and then 1.25 miles when we get to Worldwide Technology Raceway next week. Should be a good one. So far, Nick DeGroot, Craig Forsyth, Matt Wagner, they're putting their names into the conversation to be a champion here in Season 5. Could another driver add their name to that list next week? We're going to have to wait and find out, as we'll be bringing you coverage next Wednesday night from Gateway with the green flag scheduled to fly at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But a crazy one here tonight at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Matt Wagner, the winner. Scott, it's been a great one here this evening. Appreciate you joining me in the booth.
Oh, Seth, again, I'm here for the fun. The commentating is just extra. Oh, boy. Next week from Gateway, are you kidding me? I'm keen.
Also want to thank Matt Rod for stepping in here in the early stages of this broadcast, and thank you to you, the viewers here tonight, for joining us for an exciting finish at the Magic Mile. For Matthew Rodriguez, Scott Rankin, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night. We'll see you at Gateway next week as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.